I said the best thing that possibly could have happened was that we could bring my mum alive again one more day, sit down with her and ask her everything about the planning of her death, where her will is, what her wish is, what kind of funeral she wants, and just go through all of that. And obviously, you can't do that. So then we wanted to build a platform that allowed people before death to get their preparations in place.
Every startup has a story, but this one will probably stay with me for quite some time. In this episode, we dive into the inspiring journey of Sam Grice, a dynamic entrepreneur who transformed personal tragedy into an impactful innovation. Growing up in New Zealand in an entrepreneurial family and with a background in brand management, Sam, receiving the dreaded news of the tragic passing of his mother, felt compelled to create positive change in the bereavement care space, and so launched Guardian Angel, a death care solutions provider aimed at simplifying the bereavement process by connecting families, friends, and funeral directors, offering services like digital wills, post-death personalized messaging, and also appropriate bereavement support. Following its acquisition by Octopus Group, Guardian Angel rebranded as Octopus Legacy and continues to help families prepare for and navigate the complexities of end-of-life planning. Join us as Sam shares his insight on leadership, resilience, and the future of death tech in this deeply personal and compelling interview. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. I've been really intrigued by your business and your business model, but nonetheless very excited to talk to you. How are you today in sunny East London?
No, I'm very good, and thanks for having me, Gareth. No, it's a lovely day.
Let's start with a boom then. We always ask this question to get going. What does good leadership mean to you, Sam?
I think good leaders need to inspire people ultimately. And I think whether that's employees, I'm trying to convince employees to join you. I think if you're an early stage company, it's competitive. So you've got to inspire people on the mission you're going on, what you're trying to achieve. I think people often like to be working towards something bigger than just a product or a SaaS thing or something you're doing here. It's what are you trying to achieve? And I think if you can inspire your future employees or your current employees, but then that also translates into investors, but also business to business relationships as well. So people need to be inspired by your cause and what you're trying to achieve. And I think ultimately that inspiration comes from the leader. Needs to be.
Yeah, you need to be bought into your model and your business plan more than anyone, don't you? And if you are, then people will follow you because it just comes across in everything that you do, all your interactions with your team, doesn't it, Sam?
Yeah, you can't fake passion. It's really, really hard to do. Maybe for a few months, but not for the slog of startups and building businesses. You're talking years, and so if you're passionate about something, you'll inspire people, and so ultimately that's what's helped makes companies become very successful.
Absolutely. So we'll come on to Guardian Angel in a bit more detail in due course. But before we get there, people may not know Sam Grice. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So from New Zealand originally, very small country compared to England, fairly normal upbringing. Though I did come from a household of, so actually probably not that normal, came from a household of entrepreneurs. So both my mum and dad were entrepreneurs. So I've always had exposure to starting businesses and that side of life, which I guess a lot of people don't actually get access to. But then went to university, did a degree, started my journey into jobs, and I was kind of always noticing myself as being quite a disruptor, the way I try to do things and try to think about things, and then went into finance, which was what my degree was on. I was on economics. And then in about 2016, I lost my mother in a car accident, which was probably the biggest changing point in my life. So I went through all sorts of emotions there, and I can talk to you a lot about the journey I've been on since that day. But I guess up until then, it was a very, I would say, standard life with a lot of exposure to entrepreneurship.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my dad was a tech entrepreneur. Well, he actually started as a civil engineer. So he built bridges, was mainly what he did.
Oh, okay.
And then he then started to start a business, and he picked recruitment. So he started a recruitment business. He then had a big client, and they were a SaaS company back in the day.
Yeah.
And then they invited him to a conference. He went to that conference and someone stood up on stage and talked about WAP. I don't know if you remember WAP. It was like internet on those old phones.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of like GPS, wasn't it? Or it was like picture messages and stuff like that, is it?
Exactly. Yeah, and really basic internet on the phone.
Wow, I haven't heard that for years. Wow.
And interestingly, someone stood up on stage in an inspiring speech, obviously, and talked about how WAP was the future of the world, which obviously has changed a lot since those days. And he got so inspired by it, he decided to start a WAP business, which evolved into a company. And effectively what that evolved into was one of the first companies that allowed people to text to television. So when you were watching something on television and you wanted to vote for someone, you'd send a text message in, and that would be via your phone. And that was the software that WAP could do at that point. And that was his first company. And I saw that from start right through to did very well at that and was a very successful company. So I saw that through my dad. And then my mum was more of a ad hoc entrepreneur. So she started a cafe, she started a fashion label, she started a tofu business. So she kind of never really got the idea that stuck, but she consistently through my childhood was starting something, which she obviously had a passion for, which was really, really, really exciting.
Oh, fantastic. So it's obviously in the blood then, Sam. I understand you had, was it your first jaunt into setting up your own venture with a paleo business? Is that
clean paleo? So that was a kind of I would say what probably people class today as a side hustle, which I've got a lot of advice on those never working. But so we started that as a kind of a let's get it going. At the time, I was on the paleo diet, which did turn out to be a bit of a fad. And the problem with paleo is you couldn't eat grains. And so we were saying, well, there's no cereal in the market. So if you went into the supermarket, you couldn't buy anything really. Then it was really, really difficult. And so we created a paleo cereal. We produce it at night in a cheesecake factory and put it in bags and sell it to organic shops. And then we pitched to one of the big supermarkets and actually got ranged, which was huge. So they ordered massive amounts of the cereal.
That's amazing.
And we had no real way to produce it. So we actually had to make a factory. And at that point, it started to get such a big business. And I had a full-time job. It wasn't my passion. And I kind of went into an advisory off the board and helping them with marketing and branding. But that company went on and did its thing. And so that was kind of my first exposure to getting something from, a bag from a cheesecake factory at night into someone's home and actually seeing a business start to grow myself. So that was my first touch with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, sure. Is there any lesson that stood out from that experience which you took forward into your next venture?
Yeah, two big ones. One's probably more controversial. The first is side hustles are hard. If you've got a job or you've got something else going on, successful companies are quite, and they fully encase your life. When you're at home, when you're at work, constantly every day, when everything's going fine. But when things start to go wrong, it actually is really hard to have something else to do in your life. And so side hustles, in my experience, is challenging. Unless it's something you can do with kind of SaaS, might be a bit easier.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely not raw good products. And then the second was I started it with friends, and that didn't end very well. So I think there's a lot of people that do that, and they successfully manage businesses with their friends and family. What I would say is you also hear a lot of stories that it doesn't go well. And people in business, you're having to make decisions you wouldn't normally do in your normal day-to-day life. And if you're really close with someone, it can cause a bit of friction, especially if you don't agree on something. And so that did taint our friendship for quite a while. So that was probably my exposure, is when I was going to do it again, I wasn't going to start with someone I knew.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. Well, that's two good pieces of advice, I suppose, for anyone, A, setting up a business, or B, considering setting up a side hustle of sorts. So look, I want to obviously talk about, you had a personal tragedy in your life, which obviously shaped your life and probably changed your life forever. Can you talk us through that period of your life?
Yeah, so it was obviously one of those things out of the blue. I think in the last 5 years, I've been exposed to so much death and dying. I've become somewhat of an expert on the death space.
Yeah.
But then that was my first exposure to death. I'd never really been in the driver's seat of dealing with grief before, and at that extent. But yeah, so I got a call. It was a Sunday morning. I was cooking breakfast. I got 5 calls from my sister, and you always know something's up when
of course.
My sister's calling me 5 times. I answered the phone, and she said, "Mum's dead." There's no real easy way to say that. She'd been hit by a car on her morning walk, and Dad had also been hit, and he was in hospital. So a lot of news to deal with in quite a short period of time. And the next days was frantic. It was trying to sort out everything, what to do, and I had to get up. I didn't live in the same city as my parents, so I had to get back up to Auckland, pack, organize a funeral. It was just that 2 weeks was crazy. And what I would say is you kind of, people sometimes assume, oh, well, if it's a sudden death, then it's more chaotic. What I've started to notice is that even expected deaths, people don't plan until the final minute, and sometimes they don't do plans.
Yeah.
So lots of death is chaotic. And so those 2 weeks from death to funeral, or depending on cultures, it's different. But for us, it was about 2 weeks between the death and the funeral, is just this cloud of chaos. And that's where the start of the ideas came from. But from a personal perspective, it was probably the hardest 2 weeks I'd gone through in my life. I actually lost about 5 kgs during that kilograms during that period, because you just don't eat. Wasn't that I was overstrucken with grief. It's just I lost my appetite. I don't know why.
Grief and stress does strange things to the human body and the brain as well.
My fiance is a neuroscientist, and grief actually mimics physical pain when your brain responds to it. So you are going through what would be physical pain. It just happens to be emotional, which does explain a lot when people are dealing with grief, how it's just so encompassing for them.
So do you mean in terms of the hormonal response to physical pain is very similar? Well, okay, that would make sense, I suppose, but I didn't know that. But I'm really sorry to hear about your loss and stuff. But so if you could maybe talk us through, you obviously during this process came up with this idea of a business. How did that sort of manifest itself initially, and how did you get that going?
It's a good question. I look back, I sometimes wonder. It would have been literally days after Mum's death. I was thinking about a business, which I know sounds really, really weird, but I think looking back now, it was a coping mechanism for me for dealing with what I was going through. And I remember specifically it was my dad, who's an entrepreneur, my cousin, who's an entrepreneur, and my uncle, who's not. My mum, because she died so suddenly, everyone had sent food and flowers to the house. It looked like a florist in a cafe altogether. There was food everywhere, flowers everywhere. It was a bit chaotic. And my uncle actually said, wouldn't it be a really good service if you could coordinate the support, like for months? Because this leaders of lasagnas are going to go, you can't eat them all. And it would be nice in, say, 2 months to receive a lasagna, which it probably would have been. And so that was the initial idea. And I remember my dad and my uncle, so my cousin was sitting around just discussing kind of, that would be interesting. I guess, again, our way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I think from there, it just triggered me to start to think about what I could build to make our family's life easier during that 2-week period. And we've gone on a wild journey since there. But effectively, that's the crux of what Guardian Angel and what now is Octopus Legacy is trying to do, which is alleviate that chaos from people dealing with loss. And we've got lots of ideas about how we can do that. But that was that official original coalface was me experiencing, I think, a lot of good ideas. People are waiting for that good idea, and ultimately sometimes it just comes to a lived experience. You go through something and you go, man, that was crap. And if you're an entrepreneur, you want to make it better.
Absolutely. So can we please zoom in a little bit on the product side of it then? Okay, can you just maybe give us an overview of that, the early days of creating that product, and how you turned your idea into reality, and how you evolved the product in the first maybe 6 to 12 months to getting towards what you've got now?
The name Guardian Angel actually comes, my aunties helped with a lot of that organization through the process of dealing with Mum's loss. Dad was very distraught, and I was kind of had to take the lead in the family. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was kind of listening to my aunties. My aunties really helped. They're amazing. And at the funeral, Dad referred to them as his guardian angels. That's where it came from. And so I was thinking, well, that's a great name. And then I guess the initial product was trying to build something to replicate that. So how can I replicate my aunties in a technical way? Can I give people my 2 aunties as a SaaS product? It's effectively, I guess, how my brain was thinking. And so where we came to was effectively like Facebook group style platform for death, allowed families to connect, coordinate that support I was talking to about, leave messages, memories, find a funeral director if they needed it, kind of just like a signposting business. That was how we originally started. And I came to the UK. I was in New Zealand at the time. I came to the UK to start a business. Because of Mum's death, I was going through a bit of a life changing, let's do something. I was going to go, most of my friends were in the UK anyway. It's very common for Kiwis to come overseas and do on the youth mobility. And I just did it slightly differently. So rather than working at a bar, I thought I'd start a business. And I came up with a pitch deck, which was that concept I just took you through. I got lucky enough to get onto an accelerator, and I didn't tick any boxes for an accelerator. I was a non-technical solo founder with no product, pre-product. Probably every worst thing you could possibly. When you read all the blogs on how to get on an accelerator, I didn't have any of them.
You had branding experience, though. You were a branding guy. That's a positive.
To be fair to me, I had started a business before, so I'd seen how grueling it was.
And that's a massive advantage on people who haven't done that, isn't it? So yeah, for sure.
So I did have that up my sleeve, but and the second time around. And then I went through that accelerator, and it was the first exposure I'd really had about talking about death publicly to people about let's build a business in the space. And it was like Marmite. So a lot of people, oh, that's a bit morbid. No, I don't want to deal with that. And then some people increasingly excited about, well, the space needs someone to come in and help and do something to make it better. And so I went through that accelerator mainly to flesh out the idea, which was that support group kind of platform. Raised quite a bit of investment. That was in 2018. So I think I raised about £600,000, which the pre-seed was actually quite a big round back then. So to your point on the 6 to 12 months development, this is when our company really did start to evolve a bit. So the plan was, well, how do we create a product that people really, really love? How do we distribute it? How do I find myself at 27 sitting at home stressing out about stuff? And the reality is it's very, very difficult because you shut off from the world. So you're not actively looking to buy anything. You're not actively looking for anything. And you're a bit vulnerable. So you're not really wanting to play around on new software that you haven't seen before, you trust. And so we decided that funeral directors was a good way for us to distribute that product. And so we'd go out, we'd talk to them. They were at the coalface. And what we started to realize is that the industry was probably 10 years behind where most industries are in regards to tech enablement. And we were talking to funeral directors that didn't really even quite have a website themselves, let alone talk to their clients about software that they don't really quite get. And so we started to spend money. We had investors in, really, really empathetic investors trying to make this work. And so we went through a product shift, which was the same concept at heart, which is helping the bereaved. And we did a bit of a whiteboard session. I remember it. We sat down and said, what could we do to help Sam when he was sitting there at home? And one of the things that came up, it was kind of one of those moments. I said the best thing that possibly could have happened was that we could bring my mum alive again one more day, sit down with her and ask her everything about the planning of her death, where her will is, what her wish is, what kind of funeral she wants, and just go through all of that. And obviously you can't do that. So then we wanted to build a platform that allowed people before death to get their preparations in place, not just a will, but holistically, so prepared for death and not afraid to use the term death. Some people don't like it, but we're a death tech business, help people prepare for death. And then so when that person dies, we can come in and help and support that family. So for example, if my mum had used our services to prepare for death, then Octopus Legacy could have come in and supported Sam through that process. And they would have known everything about my mum. They would have known her will, her life insurance policies, and it would have just been a way smoother process. And so we evolved from kind of post-death support to pre-planning, but we wanted to keep both of those things in our brand rather than stripping one out. We think it's really, really important. So when you're writing your will, it's not for you. It's a selfless act. You're going to be dead. So it's not your will. It's your family's will. It's not your life insurance. It's not your funeral plan. And so we wanted to kind of build a product for your loved ones. So if Gareth comes to us to prepare, it's actually your beneficiaries that we're going to be helping. So that's where our brand evolved over the kind of first 12 to 18 months.
Wow, okay. You obviously entering into a very immature marketplace from a technical software standpoint then, yeah? So did you have any difficulty selling this to, for example, the funeral companies? And how would you pitch this to people who were maybe not digitally savvy? Was that a problem for you? And how did you overcome that problem?
It was. I think it was not hard to convince them on the idea. This would help. They could see that it would help their families. What we would often get is a lot of pushback around, well, our customers are a little bit older and they're not technically savvy. And what you would find is they were not technically savvy, so they assumed no one was technical savvy. And so it was kind of very challenging, but very frustrating to say, can you just let people use it? And you'll probably see that actually this would work. So we knew it. We had the data. Each hub, you get about 150 to 200 people. And some of the bigger hubs we'd seen is 7,000 people was a very tragic young guy died. And so these hubs can get massive and they're very, very supportive of people. And so it was kind of convincing in that. But to answer the point is, we got to a point, which is why we moved into pre-planning. So will writing and things was that it was going to take us 10 years to probably get market share between these funeral directors. Unless we could buy the funeral directors and force them to use the software, they just weren't going to evolve to it. And the biggest eye-opener was the funeral director people are very lovely, but they're very
traditional. Let's call it. They're very traditional.
Very traditional. Yeah. I mean, they do. What would often happen? So I'd sit there and I'd present my software. I would say, here we are, and then they would talk to me. They'd be interested, but then it would never lead to anything.
Yeah.
And then they would take me on a tour of the funeral home, and they would show me their fridges, their morgues. They would show me bodies in the display room. That's what they were proud of, and they would show me their business. And so they were too different. It was very, very difficult. Which is why we pivoted into pre-planning, because it was easier to deal with people that are planning for death, because we can find them because they're looking to plan rather than being reactive.
Yeah, for sure. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bedigitaluk.com to find out more and get in touch. So I want to ask you this question, Sam, and I don't know if you've ever been asked this before. You speak brilliantly about the business, and you're clearly passionate. You've clearly got entrepreneurialism in the blood that comes from a tragic story. So all of those ingredients are there. But obviously, you were working in a business which is quite morbid. It's not for everybody, and you're obviously very driven and want to make it. So what gets you out of bed in the morning, Sam? What drives you to really grow and scale this business?
I think the fact that I don't think it's morbid probably helps. So I believe that death's actually it's the opposite of morbid. It's probably the most human thing we all go through. As you said, we're all going to die. And I think the conversation's changing. I'm getting a lot more people willing to open up and talk about death. I mean, the fact we were acquired by Octopus shows that actually a leading household name brand is thinking, yeah, actually this could be a space that could become something that people do. Not, I would say joy is the wrong word, but something that becomes kind of household. So it gets me that. And we deal with clients. I mean, I've dealt with people dealing with cancer, terminal. They've come to us, they need a will. I've dealt with parents that have lost children post-death.
Yeah.
I know that sounds morbid, but actually no, it's not. It's really nice to actually be to help these people. It's probably the worst thing they're going through in their life, and you can, as a founder, you can actually make someone's life a little bit better. You're not going to take away the pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that gets me going. And what I would say is with recruitment, you're right. So it's like Marmite. And what we find is that a lot of people have that initial, no, I wouldn't want to work for that. But the people who apply and the people who want to work here are probably the most passionate people about what we're doing. Then you'll see.
Yeah.
In interviews, people try to pretend they're passionate about the company. I can see straight through that. But I'd say most of the people that get to the interview stage with me are genuinely interested about the space, and they think it can help people. And a lot of, especially the younger generation now, are looking for jobs that help people, that do good in the world.
Yeah,
and
sure.
If you can help people deal with loss, I think it's a good thing. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I think I'm an entrepreneur, so I enjoy the idea that we're actually doing stuff and we're moving forward and we're making change. And it's not just something that I could sell. I mean, I spent a lot of my life in finance. I could probably make a finance SaaS tool and sell it to brokers. I mean, probably. but would that get me out of bed in the morning? Probably not. I probably would have lost interest by now.
I would guess, Sam, that you are somebody who is, wherever you go, you will be looking at problems that you can solve from a commercial standpoint. Is that something that just haunts you? But it's a brilliant thing, isn't it? It's just entrepreneurialism is just built into you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. I have different ideas every day. I think it's the
you need to write them down. You need to make a little repository of these ideas.
Our founder's kryptonite is the fact that and entrepreneurs is that the ideas keep coming and you get distracted. I think it was Netflix's founder said he's the worst angel investor ever. He's made 150 angel investments because he says yes to everything that pitches him because he gets too excited. So it's just one of those things. It's my brain constantly thinking, and that can be very distracting in the early days of a company because you have to be a little bit focused but not too focused. So if you're trying to inspire people about something big and changing something and making it really big, your business plan is often quite complicated, and it's not a matter of stripping that down. It's a matter of articulating it in a way that sounds like, yep, this is easy to execute. But I would say that every day I come into work, I think of a new idea within my space that I could do, and we open a door and we go, why is that bad? Why is there no insurance for this? Why is there no this? And it can be very distracting and overwhelming. So and luckily now we've got a lot of capital to be able to execute a lot of that stuff. But it is. I would say it is a bit like kryptonite.
Yeah, for sure. So you're a sole founder, Sam. So you need to try and replicate your enthusiasm and your passion for what you're doing within your leadership team, for example, and hopefully within all of your staff, all of your hires. How have you gone about finding that talent typically? What's your experience of growing from a headcount and human capital perspective?
Yeah, I would say I've never struggled to find good talent. And the talent I found, I think it's like you said, it's one of those topics you'd only apply if you actually were somewhat kind of interested, because otherwise there's no way I don't work at that company. So it naturally selects down.
You need to be quite mentally resilient, though, surely. You can't be upset easily to work in this world. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but also half my team has lost someone really close to them, if not more than half. So we get a lot of people that have actually been through what I went through. So there's a lot of my team have lost their parents. A lot of my team have lost their really close friends, lost their grandparents recently. So I'd say death as an exposure to it helps. And then I think I generally do the last interview. So it's very, very important that I interview everyone that joined before they join the business. And generally I have a conversation not much different to this. And I can see pretty quick if they actually think it's exciting, or whether they're just saying they think it's exciting because they want to come work for us. And that helps. So I kind of am the gatekeeper. Obviously, not everyone's going to be super passionate about death and dying. But what I would say is there's a lot of tech entrepreneurs and talent that want to work for something that's disruptive. And there's not many industries that have literally not even had the digital revolution yet, and that's what we're going into. So it's quite exciting for like even some developers to look at this and say, oh, well, we can build these products from scratch because the industry doesn't have them. And that's quite inspiring for people as well.
So can I ask you about entrepreneurialism then, Sam? You're pretty well qualified to give people advice. If a young person or maybe an older person comes to you with an idea or something, and is looking for investment and wants to create a product and take it to market, what advice do you give to entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs? What advice do you give to these people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd say from my learnings, I guess this would be subjective, but when you're wanting to do it full time. The side hustle stuff never worked. And I see a lot of people come up with great ideas doing it in evenings and weekends. And it's just one, it's hard to focus, but two, you're never going to be taken seriously by investors or customers. If people think it's you're only going to be working on this at night or on the weekends, I mean, it's not that inspiring for an investor or someone to join that team, because you're not actually taking it fully seriously. So if you believe it is a good idea and it could change the world or be a really, really big business, and your gut's saying that, then you need to do it full time, in my opinion. You shouldn't follow money. So you see a lot of entrepreneurs, and I can see it now as I'm an angel investor, but I'm also, I work with a lot of early stage startups through mentorship and helping them. And you can see the ones that they mean well, but they've gone after an industry because it's a big size of prize, a big TAM, and they're like, this market's massive, I'm going to make heaps of money, I'm going to be a billionaire. That wears out after about 18 months. When one of my favorite quotes of startups is Mike Tyson, is everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
I love that.
And the startup journey is getting punched in the face every single day. And if your sole purpose is money or making money or the market's big, you see founders lose that quickly. And that's a big reason why startups fail, is they'll join a co-founder, or there'll be two or three of them. Similar to what happened with my cereal business. And one of them might lose passion. And if one of them loses passion, then what do? Do you give the equity back? It gets complicated and there's friction forms. And so make sure you're really passionate about it. And if you're going to go in with co-founders, make sure they're really passionate about it, which is actually very difficult, which is why a lot of startups fail, because someone in the founding team or the founders is not actually passionate. So be passionate and fully commit to it, because it takes a lot longer than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. What about raising capital, raising funds to get going at seed level, or maybe beyond that, Series A or whatever? What is your experience, and what advice do you give to entrepreneurs about raising money?
Yeah, you need to be resilient to be getting told no. You're going to be told no every day, and generally good investors will actually give you feedback, which can actually be quite hard to read at first. So they will say why your business is not going to work in their opinion. And obviously you're currently be passionate, you think it's going to work, and you've got to get through that and actually start to read between the lines, and you might start to see some common threads on what they think. Yeah. So if everyone's saying your market's too small and you're trying to make it seem bigger, it's probably because your market's too small, and maybe you should look at it a little bit bigger and see how you could make this big at scale. So be resilient to being told no, and that it is a slog. I think LinkedIn is not accurate, and you see a lot of people, I've raised in 3 months and I've done this and that, and it's all, I've never ever seen that happen. I know people that have posted that, and I know it's taken them 6 months. I'm like, what are you doing? So it's all this big FOMO game thing which people play, which in my mind has led to the disaster of the last couple of years, where all these companies have nothing sustainable behind them except FOMO that they raised. And so it takes time. I'd say in general 6 to 9 months you're looking at, and that is nearly a full-time focus for you, because you need to be speaking to, I think I would have spoken for our seed round, I would have spoken to 60, 70 venture firms. The fact we got on the phone with that many is a good sign. So obviously that kept me going, because most people don't even get a response from VCs. So if you're not getting a response, that's your business plan. If you start to get a response, and then it's your pitch, and then you slowly hone that in, but it takes a long time. And it's like a marriage. So they've got to be as passionate as you are, and finding someone who's passionate about you are takes time. So I would say don't think you're going to go out to 5 or 10 investors and they're all going to say yes. Go out to many, but then likewise don't go out to 400 and send a blank cold email and expect to get response. So be targeted, but it's a big work. Treat it like sales, and expect it's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So was it 2022 you caught the attention of one of the biggest venture capital firms in Europe, Octopus Group, which resulted in an acquisition or a partial acquisition. Talk us through how that came about, okay, and what was your experience of that whole episode?
Again, this will link to passion, and I'll explain why. But we were fundraising. We actually had a decent amount raised. I think we were probably close to 2.5 million committed. So it was all looking good. The market was a bit shaky.
Was that a Series A, Sam? Was it?
It's kind of like we were calling in a late seed at that point.
Right. Okay.
I think the market was a bit shaky, so everyone was trying to get kind of funding in before the dark storm came.
Of course.
And so it was kind of like we were raising a little earlier than we needed to. But anyway, yeah.
So this was around post-COVID, post-second lockdown, COVID, 21-22. Is that sort of that time? Is that right?
Middle of 2022. So
Right.
that was when the venture market was starting to deflate a bit. So
Yes,
it was a
of
bit
course.
like, let's get some money in while investors can invest, basically.
Understood. Yeah.
And it was going quite well. And then as part of that, we met Octopus, as you know, that Octopus Ventures is part of Octopus Group, which is, and they were a very active investor. And I got invited to a meeting. One of the angels that was investing in our round was actually the chairman of Octopus. So he said, you should speak to Octopus. And I started speaking to the investments team about an investment. It was going well. But then one of the co-founders of Octopus, called Simon, he wanted to come to the meeting. And this is very, very rare. He doesn't normally come to pitch events, meetings. And not only did he come to the meeting, he came on his holiday, which is also, I thought, very rare. And he asked all the questions. And his questions were not what I normally expect. So it was all about customer. What do you do if you've done wrong, if you've made a mistake, do you refund them? He was very odd questions compared to what I would expect, which was about my business model and what I'm going to do. So he was probably trying to sniff out if I was customer friendly. We did the presentation. I thought I answered it quite well. He asked about my competitors. Where do you see the space in future? And then after the pitch, he asked if he could call me that evening for a conversation. And I was wondering, that's a bit weird. Again, normally that doesn't happen. So fine. I talked to him, and he took me through it. He said he thought my pitch was great. He thought what we were trying to do could make the world a better place. And that's what Octopus ultimately tries to do.
Yeah.
And to the passion, he'd actually just lost his father. And it was the night before his dad's funeral. And so he came to that pitch day on his holiday. It wasn't really his holiday. He was on bereavement leave. And everything I explained about the industry and what's wrong with it and what needs to improve, he'd literally just gone through. And so timing's a big thing in startups.
Oh,
but
100%.
I got him at the right time and passion. And so when you said, how do you find an investor? I mean, you find someone who's passionate, and sometimes it is just a matter of over time. And so Simon said to me that you're going to need a lot of capital, and it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be done quickly. And you need someone who's going to say, well, what's this business going to look like in 100 years, not what's going to look like in 18 months. And so he painted a picture that being a majority stake being taken out by Octopus Group, which sits above the ventures, and then rebranding into an Octopus company and leveraging that brand, which is a household name, to become the biggest death tech company in the country and maybe the world, will be more likely with him. And for what it's worth, I did agree with him.
How did you feel about the rebrand? Because obviously that's a name that you came up with. I suppose it's just a name, but I mean, it must have been a bit of a big decision, really, to accept that name change. How did you feel about that initially?
It was my choice. Octopus views itself as an entrepreneurial group of companies, and they let the founders and the entrepreneurs make their own calls and then support them when they can. So it was a decision. It got floated because we had the option to do it. And we did a lot of back and forth on what was the pros and cons of keeping Guardian Angel and the pros and cons of flipping to Octopus.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Octopus investments and ventures have always, they have an approach of treating customers fairly. They're loved by people. Energy is obviously a big part of that. And we thought that the pros outweighed the cons. And it was hard. But what I would say is that original concept of Guardian Angel, which was replicating my aunties in a time of need, is still the core part of our business. So what's in a name, I guess, is the point. And there's a lot in a name, but as long as that culture is still there, it's important. And I think since then, our conversion rates have gone up, our customer experiences have gone up because people are coming to us at much higher levels because they know who we are. We go out and people know our brand. So it's definitely been the right call commercially, and then I think ultimately from a brand perspective, it will be the right call.
So can you tell us about the future then? I'm wondering, how do you develop your product? And are you going to implement any AI capability into it? Or are there any other innovations or product development or any other R&D that you're currently working on that you think could evolve your product?
Yes, 100%. I think a big part about our industry is it's paper-based. Will writing, lasting power of attorney, it's paper, and probate is paper-driven processes that can take a long time. So, for example, we'll get sent a box from a client after their death with all the paperwork in it, and we have to manually read it. It's just what we have to do, and that can take 5 hours of a day. With scanning and AI, you can automate that into minutes of work. So, I don't believe that AI would ever replace a human. So we believe humans in the death space should have human-to-human contact. You should be able to talk to someone.
100%.
You should be able to speak to someone. Don't think a bot is appropriate.
No.
And there is some stuff on you talked about cool companies. There are some people playing around with using AI to bring people back from the dead, which we can go into in a second. But I would say from our perspective, what we are going to do is try to make that back-end infrastructure tech-enabled through AI and become very efficient, which means we can be competitive on cost, but also means that we can spend our capital resource on customer service and people, making people deal with the grief process a bit better than having to read a box of paperwork. And that's where we should be putting our capital resources into dealing with customers and human-to-human contact versus reading energy bills from the past to try to work out what the most recent one is.
Yeah, sure. So just a very quick question on the typical customer for you. Obviously, if somebody is at the latter stages of their life and they feel like, their will and stuff is becoming more of a concern, then I can see why that customer would be perfect for this platform. Obviously, if someone's got some sort of terminal illness, of course, that would be a perfect customer. How many other customers do you have with people who are really middle-aged, or how often are people thinking about engaging with something like this? Because I have no idea.
We see a range, and the death preparation trigger is generally triggered by a life event. So what we see is we do get young families, so they've just had a child or they've just purchased their first home and they've been told you need to get your will sorted because you've got a kid now that needs guardians. And so that's kind of the first trigger point. So we get a lot of, say, 28 to 35-year-olds coming on, and they they don't
really?
want to talk to a solicitor. Yes, yeah. So I'd say about 30% of our customers are under the age of 35, and that's because they've had a child and bought a home, and they should have a will. And because if you have had a child, you should select guardians for that child. And so it is something that people know. Generally guidance from their parents. So, you're an adult now, sort your stuff out. And then we see nearing retirement, like you said, and then obviously we see nearing death. So they're the kind of three trigger points we see.
Yeah.
And another one we do see is what I went through. So people that have just been exposed to death and it scared them a little bit, and they want to come and get their stuff in order. And so that's a trigger that doesn't really attach to age or lifestyle. It's more timing. But yeah, we get a range of customers. So it's not the mode of delivery is where we see the segmentation. So, for example, we offer home wills. You can come to someone's home and you can write their will.
Yeah.
Most of those people are over 70. Our online will software and online insurance, that type of thing, that's when we see the 30-year-olds because they can get it done, and you can get your will done in 15 minutes online.
Yeah.
Not talking to anyone. So it's easy.
To my shame, I'm 43 years of age. I have 2 children, and I do not have a will. It's one of those things that, you just keep putting it off, don't you? It's so I'm definitely going to check this out, Sam. I'm assuming someone in my position, you see that quite a lot, I'm assuming. And I can go onto your platform, create a will, get logins and pass them to my partner or whatever, my next of kin. They can go onto the platform and it's all there for them then, I suppose. Is that typically... There's a bit more to it than that.
So if you were to come to our website, depending on your wishes, it would take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to write your will.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to speak to anyone unless you needed to. We've got a chat and we've got a phone number. You then print it out and sign it, and that's your will. It actually is not a very complicated process. It's something that people put off. And you're not alone, Gareth. 70% of adults don't have a will. So we get the people that are in the 30%, but ideally what we're trying to do is have more of these conversations to actually explain it's not that hard to do, and it's something you should do, because if you were to die tomorrow without a will, you die intestate. And if you read the government's rules or the legal rules on intestation, they probably wouldn't match your wishes. And so you do have a will, it's just the will that the government wrote for you. And so it's better to correct that if it's not what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit now, Sam, about, obviously you're an entrepreneurial guy. I'm sure you're constantly looking at new innovation and new products around you. What tech, we spoke a little bit about AI, but I'm keen to get your thoughts on what are you most excited about in relation, what tech innovations have you seen recently that really excite you?
Yeah, it sounds very simple, and it is, but it's companies engaging with video and memories. And I know that sounds really 20 years ago, but the space hasn't seen any innovation. So what I mean there is these companies working on in America, they've put QR codes on gravestones, and you can scan the QR and you see a video of the person who's died and them talking about their life and who they are. And I think that stuff's kind of cool. I think lasting legacy is quite fascinating. I was talking about this the other day, and it would be fascinating if you go to William Shakespeare's gravesite and have a video of him talking about his thoughts and his memories and his legacy. And I think humans haven't done that. You've got the technology in your pocket, in your phone, to record yourself and your story. Luckily for you, you've got a podcast, you've got a history of who you were, but a lot of people don't, and we see a lot of companies kind of challenging that. I would say I don't think it's something I would do, but potentially, but I think it's cool that people are looking at it. I think you have 7 minutes of someone, video and audio, and you can recreate them using AI. And I think that's a bit could be seen as Black Mirror type stuff, but ultimately, if that's going to help someone with the grieving process, and they can, would I do that and bring mum back? I probably would if I had footage of her.
Sure.
But that type of stuff in the industry is cool. And then also the way we dispose of bodies. I know that sounds very morbid, but we did burial and cremation for years. And now in America, what's becoming really, really common is composting and forest buildings. People burying natural burials. They're going out into the environment, and then so rather than your family coming to a grave site and seeing you or ashes at home, they can walk through a forest and go see your tree and what have a quiet time around that tree and think of you. That type of thing is coming. And I know it sounds really simple, but this stuff hasn't happened in the industry, which is quite cool.
That's really interesting. I've not heard of that. Are you seeing any other innovations like that, Sam, within the sort of funerary world or the death tech world? Anything else that sort of stands out for you?
Yeah, there's lots. But a lot of it is around, I guess it's innovating the traditional process you said. So there's a firm in LA that is using mushrooms to decompose bodies. I would say it's kind of interesting stuff that's happening that I see, whether that gets to scale and becomes the normal way of doing it. But what I do like is the stories like that are becoming more normal, and they're in the news and they're in the media, and that does show that this industry can be discussed, and can be talked. And there's a company in America that's developed an AI bot, and what it does is you send it all the messages that the person that has died has sent you in their life, and then it creates a bot that you can chat to that is in the tone of your loved one. And
really?
And again, that might that might bring some closure to people. I think it's really important that people understand that their loved one has died. But if that can help through those first few months when you just want to, well, what would mum say right now? I think that's good. And I think society is going to have to tackle with this stuff as we get technology, because there's going to have to be a call on whether we think it's normal to have AI bots of people that have died talking to us or not. And society will work that out. I shouldn't have an opinion on it. Society will, and we'll follow where our customers want to go. So if that becomes something people really, really want to do, then we will probably launch a product around it.
Well, think about it. If you could create a chatbot of historical characters to give you advice on certain things, you could get science project advice from Isaac Newton. So aside from your industry, Sam, what do you think about ChatGPT and generative AI? Is it something that you guys have benefited from a productivity and marketing operation standpoint? Where do you stand on using chatbots like ChatGPT and Gemini to create content and so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. We use it a lot. I think I use it a lot. In general, I think it's the search tool and the enablement of the future workplace from a productivity perspective. If you're not using it now, it's definitely in its infancy for sure. But if you're not using it now, what you notice with technology, because it evolves exponentially, if you don't start engaging with it as it evolves, by the time it's ready for, now it's like everyone uses it, you've got 5 years of learning to catch up on. And you see that with, it took a lot of people, with Word and Excel, and then they just didn't use the stuff as it came out. And then the workplace moves on, and you're saying, what's your proficiency on Excel used to be a question in interviews. I mean, if that shouldn't be a question, and you should be proficient because it's a tool that everyone uses.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So I think a generative AI and those tools will become normal-place. And if you're not using it to help you with your presentations, and someone is, they're going to be more efficient, they're going to be more productive, and probably more researched on things.
But the saying is, you won't be replaced by AI, but you may be replaced by somebody using AI, and I think that's 100%. very relevant, isn't it? But so, you're a busy chap, Sam. You're running a business. You're running around. You're having 25 ideas a day about things that you can commercialize. What I want to ask you is, how do you achieve balance in your life, and how do you remain productive, but in the right areas?
Yeah, so it's a good question. A big one for me actually is which entrepreneurs struggle with, is learning to delegate, become more productive actually.
Yeah.
So if there's only so much I can do in my day, my brain is my brain. I can't change my brain. It's very disruptive to me, but delegation helps, and having people around me that can help me, that I trust to delegate to, is a big part. I would say that I try to shut off, but I think most founders, most entrepreneurs will know that it's very difficult to. So what I try to do is, rather than have work-life balance, it's work-life integration. So I and my partner is very supportive of that, and that's just how I am. If I've got something in my mind and I want to send an email, it might not be the most healthy attribute, but it's better to me get that email off, and then I can focus on dinner and do stuff. And so I've integrated work into my life to give me that balance, and that makes me happy. Like, I'm going on holiday this weekend. I probably won't won't use my phone, but I might bring it out a few times. And so if I was to leave it in my bag and not bring it out, about halfway through that trip, I'd start to stress out about something and I need to send something. So I kind of have integrated it into my life in a good balance. And that means that I still get to live my life and have my, spend time with my family. I've just had a young boy, and then so spend some lovely time as a family as well. And then my business, and I would say my business is over encompassing, but most founders go through that as well.
Yeah, sure.
And learn to delegate and trust your team to do stuff, because trying to do everything and sign everything off is a hard thing to come to terms with. And then once you've got that sorted, you can become a lot more productive.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to yourself, Sam, looking back now, knowing what you know now? What advice would you give to that pre-guardian angel Sam?
It's a really good question. I didn't spend a huge amount of time trying to find a co-founder. And I didn't do that because of what I'd just been through with my other company, my cereal business. And I get asked this all the time, actually. And so I think I probably would have, whether I would have got a co-founder or not is undecided, but I didn't spend a good period of time trying to find one. And I think maybe if I had and I found the right person, I mean, we've ended up pretty in a good position. We've done well. So,
yeah, sure.
So would we have done better? I think from a stress level perspective, yes. So a lot of what I went through, the raising, the fund, the selling, a lot of stress. You have to hire people, fire people. It's a stressful time, and you don't have a trusted person you can just come and talk to. So I probably have gone and said, just spend a bit of extra time doing it.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I think that would probably resonate with a lot of listeners as well. Actually, it's a difficult thing to take on your shoulders, isn't it? Setting up a business is not easy. So yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, Sam. So let's finish on this one then. So we always ask our guests for a book recommendation. It doesn't have to be a book; it can be a story, an anecdote, a documentary, whatever. But what piece of content has inspired you recently, Sam?
Yeah, I think always a book I bring up is a book called Predictably Irrational. And I studied economics at university, and it's a book around behavioral economics about how consumers are predictably irrational. And I think it's a fascinating book, and it goes to show when you're making a business plan and you're doing a startup, people don't do what you think they should do. And so it's like having that knowledge in your back of your mind that you've got to build what customers want, even if it doesn't make sense, because ultimately they'll make irrational decisions in their life, whether they're buying software or whether they're buying a will or what they're doing. And it's like honing on that. And that's a book I read at university, and I always recommend it. It's a book that I was very, very lucky, actually. Dan Ariely, who wrote that, is a very famous behavioral economist. And I hounded him on LinkedIn for about 2 years.
Really?
To meet me. And he eventually replied. And we had an hour session, and it was probably it was an interesting session. I was a groupie. Very, very excited to have him on the call. And the reason he actually responded was that he'd been looking at death a lot himself from a psychological perspective. And we had a good chat. And so anyway, that was a side story. But yeah, that book was really, really good. And he's an amazing person. He's written a whole bunch of books. And so if anyone's listened to this that wants to learn about how consumers do make decisions, not what you think they do, is a good bit of advice. And the other bit of thing, it's not really a book, it's by Y Combinator, and it's an old school blog. I think it's from 2003 or something. And it's about doing things that don't scale in the early days. And it's something that I still bring into my team every single day, is that if it's going to be inefficient, but you can learn about the customer and it takes you 4 hours, it's worth doing at first. And then it's working out if you can scale and optimize that. So what a lot of startups do is they try to optimize everything soon before they've even spoken to anyone, add all these features and build all this stuff. And then it's like, okay, well, so Y Combinator has this blog called do things that don't scale, and read that. It's not very big, but if you're going to start a business, it's important to do things that don't scale at the start, understand your customer, understand the process, and then see if you can optimize it. Because once you've built something, if no one wants to buy it, you've wasted every minute you've spent on building that is a waste of time. And so it's better to start. And the best way to start is talking to customers.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. I'll check that out. I have actually heard of Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. I can't remember if another guest has recommended it or I've just come across it somewhere else. But we will put that book on the show notes as well. But look, Sam, thank you so much. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. I think you're doing great things. I think you've created a solution for a problem that most people don't know they have. And I think that you're doing good for the world. You're changing families' lives quite clearly. So thank you for being so candid and talking about that. And we wish you all the best for the future in terms of the growing Octopus Legacy. Okay.
Thank you, Gareth. Thanks for having me.
Oh my, that was a wonderful interview. Sam is a remarkable individual. I mean, it was obviously a tragic story. But I think he's done so well with this company in a space that I think could really benefit from a platform like this, and clearly is benefiting from a platform like this. There was a lot to consider here, but what I think stood out for me was Sam and his team's approach to innovating in this traditionally under-digitalized funerary management space. He highlighted how the industry is about sort of 10 years behind, with many still relying on traditional paper-based methods. It was fascinating to hear how Sam respectfully navigated these challenges to create a positive, tech-driven solution that benefits families, not just the individuals creating the wills. So I thought that was really nice. His insight into bringing a respectful yet transformative change to this industry I found that very inspiring, and potentially could be a good lesson for entrepreneurs in whatever field they're going into. And it was also just a testament to the power of thoughtful innovation. So I hope you took something from this interview and you enjoyed the interview. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe or leave us a review. It really helps us. But thank you so much for listening to the Tech Leaders Podcast. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.